want to stay all afternoon with my boyfriend. But I have one of these command performances by folks who are coming from Ottawa to share some of the work that we do at the Fairness Commission. Doc and all those who are part of the care for our beloved Dr. Lee, and I call him Dr. Lee rather than Dr. Lorch, because it rhymes with Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee, and he loves that. The members and representatives from the CAUT, it's an honor to be among friends and family, and all of you distinguished people, and I want to especially mention one of the former speakers of the provincial parliament, Dr. Warner, who is here with us. And so we have two speakers, two former speakers of the House. So you can see how well represented and appreciated Dr. the Honorable gentleman is. I want to add a few words. My words really is words of commendation, not only to you for recognizing him, but also to say that, that Lee, as we know him, has been a champion, has been a fighter, has been someone who has gone beyond to support community. Someone who has had no fear of challenging, someone who's had no fear of ensuring that those things that he believed in, that he would speak with them, about them, in voices and in places where oftentimes it's not appreciated. I can talk about the times when he stood up, and I think the good doctor mentioned that at the beginning, his struggle in the US, his coming to Canada, his involvement in so many organizations, his standing with individuals who hadn't the strength to stand at the times and on the occasions when they should. I can speak about his work with me and those who were involved in the Canada-Cuba Parliamentary Friendship Association, when as parliamentarians we were bringing forward some issues as they pertain to Cuba and to the Cuban people. I can talk about his friendship and the many times in which he has reached out to individuals and found the time. And I can speak about the times when he and I have had lunch, and he always knows good restaurants, and the proximity to the restaurant, how long it's going to take to get there. And by the time I get there, he already has studied the menu and can make recommendations as to what we should eat. Doctor, you've lived a life that's full, a life that has been a life of service. You've contributed to the field of education. I think we are all the better for your having been among us, encouraging, nudging, speaking out in your quiet fashion, but at the same time being firm, ensuring that all of us can move forward in a society where justice is supreme. And so to have a whole room full of people gather here today to recognize you, to say thank you, to watch you receive that tribute from CAUT is really a tremendous honor to each and every one of us, and a tremendous honor for me. And I value your friendship, and I said to you we're going to live to be 150, and I think you have some more time.
Thank you so much. I'll call upon Jim. Just before, Jim, you do this, before you present the award, I was remiss, and I should have said a very strong thank you to my new best friend, Mary, and all her staff who have made today possible. You know, they really put it together for us here, and they've worked with me, and we've had calls and phone calls, and we sussed everything out, and they've just, Bridgepoint's just come through in the most wonderfully generous way. So I'd like to publicly acknowledge that.
Augustine referred to you as the honorable, what's the phrase, the honorable gentleman. Now, there are representatives of governments for much of your life who would have never referred to you that way.
To his credit.
Absolutely. You know, they say of all of us, we're known by our enemies as well as our friends. And Lee has built up in much of his life the most wonderful group of enemies that speak highly to what a fine person he is. And then today to have all of these friends here to share in the celebration of the award that we're happy to give. The Distinguished Academic Award is the highest award that CAUT offers. It's been awarded to 6 people before. As Penny mentioned, it's given to someone who has had a distinguished record as a teacher, a distinguished record as a researcher, and equally distinguished service to the community. In my job, we have, what, Penny, we represent about 68,000 academics. As a West Coast. So I get to know a lot of people. And I can honestly say, with no disrespect to the other 67,999, or to any of the preceding winners of this award, that nothing since I've been in this job for 14 years gives me greater pleasure than to present this award to you, Lee. I cannot imagine more deserving academic, community activist, scholar than you. It's a great pleasure. The award says, Canadian Association of Universities and Teachers present the Distinguished Academic Award to Lee Lorch in recognition of an exceptional academic career in which he has excelled in teaching, research, and service to the university and the community.
Thank everybody who's here. I want to thank the CAUT for this unexpected and probably undeserved award, but it's very good for my morale. And it's also something which can perhaps inspire other old people to remain part of the community and contribute what they have to contribute. And there are a lot of people there, well on in years, who still have a lot to give and shouldn't just be written off the way a number of governments seem headed now. the list of people to whom I've become obligated for one reason or another over the years, I think should be headed by my daughter, Alice Bartels, my late wife, Grace Largan Lorch. But the list goes on from there at considerable length. I've had opportunity to learn from a great many people, to receive support from many, including a number who really didn't like the ideas I was propounding, but defended my right to fight for them, and some of whom came to understand the importance of fighting for the democratic rights of the entire population, regardless of class. Of course, so far I've spoken of individuals, but individuals can set examples. It's organizations that can bring large numbers of people together, provide the muscle with which to fight for progress. The CAUT is one such. Another one with which I was associated for a long time was the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, founded by Dr. W.B. Du Bois. I don't know how many of you have heard of him, a very great scholar, a very courageous man. There are other organizations too. None on the right that I can remember. But there's several on the left to whom I'm indebted, and to whom I would wish to direct your attention. Some were specialized, like civil rights organizations or the like, but others covered the waterfront, so to speak. This month, May, is one in which are gathered a number of reminiscences of a variety of specialized organizations. May Day itself, which is celebrated here by dancing around the maypole, originated in Chicago, Illinois, on May 1st, 1886, with the strike for the 8-hour working day. That's what helped gather the great struggle for workers' rights there. And it frightened the U.S. government enough so that they instituted what they call Labor Day, where instead of dancing around the maypole on May 1st, they do it in early September. So, and Canada's quickly copied that. So when you've heard of May Day, of Labor Day here and there, you know whence its origin. And in other issues in which I wish to invite your attention, besides the struggle against racism, the rights of the struggle of women. In this connection, perhaps my wife is best known. She was a school teacher in the city of Boston when we met at a teachers union convention, and became acquainted and eventually decided to marry. But Boston had a regulation that a female teacher will resign upon marriage. Imagine that. That was very common in this country and in that country. I think it disappeared from New York City only during the First World War. And during the Second World War, when Grace and I married, it was still prevalent in a number of places. And as we remarked at the time, that Grace was a teacher and I was an Army private. She got fired for committing matrimony. The city authorities there refused even to suspend the regulation for the duration of the war, or to make any concession of any sort. She was fired. This shortage of teachers was so great that they couldn't find anyone to replace her. So we got married during the Christmas recess, and for the rest of the school year, she taught the same kids, literally the same kids as she had before, for 1/3 of the prior salary, because they were willing to hire married women as substitute teachers. So she was substituting for a non-existent teacher for that term. It was 10 years before the city of Boston was pressured into withdrawing that regulation. The labor movement in Boston was on side at that time, and now the city of Boston has in its main park a plaque honoring Grace as having pioneered this time. We became in a way best known for our participation in what's known as the Stuyvesant Town fight. Now, Stuyvesant Town was a section of New York City previously known as the Gas House District. Where did it get its name, Stuyvesant Town? The first New York City authority, before New York City existed, was when New York City was New Amsterdam, a possession of Holland, and Peter Stuyvesant was the Dutch governor of that city. Of course, during the war, there was a mass emigration of people from the rural areas of the country, like the US and Canada, to the cities. Where are you going to house them after the war? This became a central political issue in many places. If you look around even here, you'll see many of the newer buildings, so-called newer buildings, go back to wartime planning. That was conspicuously the case in New York. And there, and as elsewhere, the government utilized what's called the right of eminent domain. That is, they would have the right to confiscate private property, paying what they set as a reasonable price, and then rebuild in that area. And a number of New York slums were eliminated, as was the case of other cities, by that device. Stuyvesant Town, then known as the Gas House District, was in that category. The Gas House District because it was a center of gas power for the city, It was housing for the impoverished workers who worked in there, and it didn't cost the city much. So they kicked out the poor without saying where they would go, without making alternate arrangements for them. This was quite usual. And turned the property over to major insurance companies. Metropolitan Life Insurance Company was the chief villain in this case. That was at that time the largest financial aggregate in the world. Its assets were $13 billion profits of the property. That's not considered top of the line anymore, but it was in 1940. And number three, I think number two was the Bell Telephone Company. Number three was another life insurance company, New York Life, with $11 billion in private holdings. So Metropolitan Life was compelled to sign with the city a contract, customary, in which they agreed to give returning veterans, we were all in the war at that time, in which returning veterans would be given priority post-war housing, and construction would begin still during the war. And now, it didn't provide non-discriminatory construction. Didn't say where the black troops were going to go, the Chinese Americans or wherever, just veterans. And Metropolitan did not accept applications even from any non-white. Of course, in those days, and still today, it's fairly common to accept applications from lots of people and find some way to shuffle them under the table. But they didn't even take the applications. They went public about it. And they said that they would not accept any non-white applications. Well, this created a reaction in the most democratic city in the country, and lawsuits began. The National Association's Advancement of Colored People, the American Jewish Congress, the Ethical Cultural Society, and several other organizations joined together to bring suit. And they sued in the courts. But each step of the way, the courts upheld the right of the landlord to choose tenants on whatever basis they wanted, including discrimination. This was in New York City, in the U.S. Now, at that time, the left was fairly strong, and it was in a fray too. You see, during the war with the alliance with the Soviet Union, the attitude toward the Soviet Union within the U.S. and left in general in the U.S. was quite different from what it became during the later Cold War years. And they had instituted what's called proportional representation, so that there's a more democratic form of electing people. And the New York City Council, for example, had on it two leaders of the Communist Party. One, Benjamin Davis, a black lawyer who had fled from Atlanta to New York, and the other, Pete Caccione, who was a longshoreman from Brooklyn. And they introduced a bill into the New York City Council to try to force Metropolitan to accept applications for rental units, regardless of race. This bill, incidentally, was co-signed by Stanley Isaacs, a Republican. It's the only bill I know of which was jointly sponsored by a Republican and a Communist. Stanley Isaacs was at that time president of the New York City Council, of the New York City Borough Council. Very interesting man. And, well, he was soon turfed out of that job. And indeed, the New York State authorities changed the election law to get rid of the left from the city council. And instead of Benjamin Davis representing largely the black minority, they got a rather conservative black politician to replace it. But of course, any black politicians have to go along with that bill. So the bill was changed from the Davis, not Davis, from the Isaacs, Isaacs, Davis, and one other bill, to the Isaacs bill, whatever the name of this politician was, and in due course it had to be passed. But that was not before they had done the usual parliamentary trick of referring it to committee. It sat gathering dust for more than 2 years before the majority of the city council was able to force it out of committee to get it voted for, and it became, I think, the first Reconstruction civil rights legislation in the U.S. It arose out of the struggle. Yes, there's some material on the back table which deals with this to show the impact which this struggle had. So the New York Times in November of last year ran a retrospective of the 50-year-old Stuyvesant Town struggle. Now, how do you get the New York Times to revive a 50-year-old struggle? It's not so easy because it's already deep in the consciousness of the city. And what placed it there this time was this. They had turfed the poor out of the gas house district to make way for a middle class. Doctors, lawyers, teachers, and so on, who would be ready, who would have steady jobs and pay rent regularly. What did they do next? They decided to get rid of the middle class. And they have upgraded this area. And they took down the sign that they put down in the center, which praised Fred Ecker, the head of Metropolitan in the early days, praising him for having foresight to provide middle-class housing for New York City. That sign is no longer there because it isn't the middle class any longer that's going to sit in those apartments. Okay. So anyway, I shouldn't go on forever about this one issue.
Go on forever.
But it was one of the issues in which we were involved. The city of New York, headed at that time first by Mayor Dwyer and then Mayor LaGuardia, went into court on the side of Metropolitan. I was on a delegation that met with the mayor, and they said, "Oh, we're all with you," but unfortunately our hands are tied. The law requires us to support our contracts and a lot of other malarkey. So this is part of the subsequent issue. Today, there are black families living in Stuyvesant Town, pursuant to that legislation and to the struggles which the population of New York supported. I should have added that when Metropolitan stopped accepting applications for the more than 3,000 apartments in Stuyvesant Town, it had already had 100,000 applications. So they never had any problem in filling a place, even to filling it on a discriminatory basis. But they wanted to demonstrate that they could lay down the law and have an all-white island in the heart of America's most democratic city. And this raised the values of segregated housing throughout the whole country. It was not just a local issue subject to whatever prejudices may exist. It was an economic issue designed to keep segregation as part of the body politic. And unless that fight was fought and won, it would have put back the struggle for democracy quite a long time. It was interesting to see the reaction of the population there. Before we went into the struggle, we had a committee, and the committee circulated among the other tenants a statement welcoming any change which might occur to democratize the housing. More than 2/3 of the tenants signed, of the white tenants, this was before any black was in there, signed that petition. So it showed that there was a strong democratic base, and it gave us the courage to go forward, and it gave the politicians to recognize and to back off. This was the major struggle in which we were engaged. I got fired from City College because of my participation in it. I then got fired from Penn State University, where I went after City College. Why? Because when I got fired from City College, I succeeded in getting a job at Penn State. And instead of giving up our Stuyvesant Town apartment, we invited black friends of ours to live in it as our guests. There was a prohibition against sub-rents. So we paid rent there, our own rent there, and had black family friends of ours live in our Stuyvesant Town apartment. That again got quite a lot of publicity, because it got the authorities at Penn State angry at us. I was called in and told to give up my Penn State apartment. I refused, my wife refused, and a few days later I got a letter that my appointment would not be renewed. So the struggle was recognized as serious everywhere. Well, we made the struggles all connected with civil rights in one form or another, but you also have the right to have a little peace and quiet, not hear you talk all the time. So we went from there to Fisk University, a black university in Nashville, Tennessee. Now, a lot of people don't understand what a black university is. It's one attended by blacks. It's not one controlled by them. Some of the black universities in the South were built by state governments there as a way of heading off the desegregation struggle. And their boards of trustees often consisted of 100% white politicians, not a single member of the board of a black say, would have to be black. So you can imagine what the situation was. And there were private universities, black universities, in different parts of the South. One system was run by the A&E Church, African Methodist Episcopal Church, and that was run as a black institution. All the trustees were black, the officials were black, and so on. But the other black institutions, including Fisk University, the one which appointed me, had a majority, a substantial majority, of white trustees. And I was called up for the so-called House Committee on Un-American Activities. I refused to tell them whether I'd ever been a member of the Communist Party. I said my political affiliations are none of their business, that's a private matter. So at first, because of the support I had in the black community, the board took no action. But then one of the white members of the board, one of the richest white members of the board, said that he was going to resign from the board, spread his resignation in the press, and take other actions against the university unless I got fired. And they collapsed. They said they referred the matter to the executive committee of the board, which consisted of 8 whites and 1 black. Can you guess what the vote to dismiss me was? 8-1. The one, by the way, was Percy Julian, who became the second black elected to the National Academy of Sciences in the U.S., a great chemist. So, anyway, I got fired, there was a fight about it, and then I got another job at Philander Smith College, a black institution, run by the Baptist Church in Little Rock, Arkansas. How many of you have heard of Little Rock? Do you remember the episode in which one of the Little Rock 9 was isolated from the other 8 and was rescued from the mob by a white woman? Remember that? That woman was my wife. And she was thankful for the Senate Internal Security Subcommittee. However, we had some support there. There was one very good Southern senator, believe it or not, Estes Kefauver from Tennessee. And he wrote to me at the time, praising Grace for her actions and saying that he would see to it that the committee would not be able to get a contempt citation against her for refusing to answer questions. And he succeeded. So, that's another positive outcome. Well,
Dr. Lorch, I'm sure that people will love after the rest of the ceremony to reminisce with you about all of your many achievements. But perhaps we should continue with the rest of the ceremony.
please.
Do you want to thank the
Okay, well,
CAUT?
I do indeed. I want to thank the CAUT in many ways, and I hope to continue my active membership in the CAUT and my active collaboration with the CAUT in its progressive moves forward. Thank you all very much for that.
wonderful talk, and thank you. That was a wonderful talk. Thank you very much, and I think we'll all look forward to hearing more bits and pieces of it as the afternoon progresses, and thank you for sharing so much with us. Jim Turk would like to make a comment, and then I have two other speakers, and then we'll have some refreshments, and we can all get our chance to congratulate Lee individually. And I'm going to ask Martin Muldoon to come up, and then Nancy Olivieri. You're back here still, if I can find you. Thank you. Martin? Sorry, Jim first, and then Martin.
Just two quick things. If you would like to see the New York Times interview with Lee last November, just go on Google and Google Lee Lorch New York Times, or Lee Lorch Stevenson Town New York Times, and you'll get the YouTube video. It's absolutely fascinating.
What was the date of that, more or less?
November 2011.
It comes up right away.
November 2010. But if you just Google Lee Lorch New York Times Stevenson Town, it'll pop up.
You'll get 40 items if you do that.
Just look for the YouTube video. The other thing, Lee was talking about wanting to continue his active involvement in CAUT. That wasn't a gratuitous remark. For the last, well, as long as I've been there, I received emails, many emails from a fellow named Lee Lorch, drawing attention to a crisis we should be addressing, or some information that would be useful. And I received lots of emails from lots of people, and have trouble coping with them. But ones I always read are the ones from Lee, and I'm looking forward to the resumption of those.
Thank you. Lee, you're looking very well, and I think many of us a month ago thought you were finished, but you've surprised us. You've made a wonderful recovery, and of course we have to put it down to the good health care at Bridgepoint. But I can't help feeling, and I think a few others have remarked on it, that the fact of this ceremony has been a great incentive for you to show the remarkable recovery you did in the past month or so. And for that, we have to thank Penny and Lorna Irwin, who nominated you for this award, and to Penny for the wonderful arrangements that she's made. Not single-handed, but I think almost so today. And thanks to Jim for making the trip from Ottawa. Now, I've known Lee for a long time, more than 50 years. So I can't begin to summarize my contacts with him. But I would just like to talk about one particular day, October 2000, which impressed me, even though I'd known him for a long time at the time. Still, it was very impressive. It was the occasion of a strike at York by QP 3903, the union of part-time faculty, largely. And as some of you may know, part-time faculty don't have an easy time of it. In fact, they often bear the brunt of the workload. And the full-time faculty doesn't always appreciate that. Quite the contrary, in fact, some of the time. But of course there are exceptions, and I can't think of a more notable one than Lee. Anyhow, on this fine October day in 2000, was the first day of the QP strike. I was on the bus approaching York. Of course, the bus didn't go into the campus. We had to turn back several blocks away because all the entrances, of course, had picket lines. It turns out there are 7 different entrances, by the way. That's become significant to what I have to say later. So I walked several blocks to Sentinel Road, just sort of towards the south side of the campus. And there I saw a whole stream of people walking north on Sentinel. They were typically people who had parked their cars way long distance off. And in that group, I see Lee and Jean Despar, who was his neighbour at the time, and who'd given him a ride. So what had I been thinking of doing? I'd been thinking of maybe doing a token walk around the picket line and then going into my office. It turned out I was on sabbatical, but I needed some things from my office there. But anyhow, once I met Lee, there was really no question. So we walked on the first picket line for half an hour. Things were really there was really a good mood there. As I say, it was the first day. And people were proposing things like going around and walking on all 7 of the gates. Now, many of you know the York campus, but even if you don't, you've read about it in the newspapers. Sprawling is the word that's usually used to describe it. But after half an hour on that gate, Lee said, let's go to one of the other gates. So we walked along the periphery to Pond Road, I think. Had another pleasant time there, walking around with people. Then to the main entrance, where there was our arrival there happened to coincide with a big demonstration of some kind. Some people remarked that Lee was by far, at 85, he was by far the oldest person on the line. And certainly the only honorary graduate of the university who was on the line. Anyhow, it was then off to Chimney Stack Road, another line, and by 2 in the afternoon we were on the north end of the campus at Founders Road. At this point, it wasn't so much fun anymore. The afternoon shifts had come on, and they didn't inherit the enthusiasm of the morning ones for some reason. There was talk of cars that had been jumping through the line and so on, near misses. So I was beginning to wonder not just how I would get home, but how I would get Lee home. Just then, who should I see but Jean Despar? He's with his car. I said, so problem solved. Lee has his ride home now. But no, Lee said, what about Northwest Gate? Shore on Drive. So it was off again. So I won't bore you with the rest of it. My remaining memory is sometime in the late afternoon persuading Lee onto a bus on Steeles Avenue, from which he obviously made it safely home. So that's just one example of Lee's action, on behalf of the downtrodden. Just one that's closer to home than some of the others that we've heard about. Lee has been very successful in many of the things he's done. Of course, his efforts don't always lead to results. One where it didn't was in Boss CAUT, was in the late 80s. Canadian Mathematical Society, which Lee has been a very long-time member, held back-to-back meetings in institutions which were under CAUT censure. Of course, the organizers said they couldn't do anything about it. It was too late in their arrangements, and so on and so on. And meetings were held. But I tell you that Lee was the person who was the most active in trying to prevent these meetings happening at censured institutions. Anyhow, Lee, we were very glad to see how well you are, and hope that you'll be around with us for a long time in the future.
Yeah, really. I think probably the worst speaking position in the whole world is trying to follow Lee Lorch. So I really have you, Penny, on my list. It's quite a daunting task to speak to that because there are so many other people in the audience here who could speak, as Martin has, about personal reminiscences, and I have a number of them. Lee's been a great friend to me. He's been supportive through every struggle I've ever had, including the loss of my father in the last 6 months, and a terrific supporter of every one of us who have encountered problems in our employment. How's that for a polite statement? We all know Lee as a tireless fighter for human rights, for educational opportunities, and for women and underrepresented minorities, for anyone struggling to maintain freedom of any sort. He continues to speak out at a remarkable age on behalf of all the victims of such processes, and his lifelong devotion to scholarship has been recognized. But I really want to speak a little bit about his personal moral courage. Fortunately, he covered most of my talk. I mean, I only had it on Google, or from personal discussions about Stuyvesant Town. But I hope he'll go on forever this afternoon about all the rest of the repeated firings. And he has been actually, from Google, there was an interesting quote. It was called "A man of principle, ostracized by academic institutions, and persecuted by a country that claims to value freedom above all else, for which we should envy him." I mean, let's face it, some of us can claim to be persecuted by maybe 1 or 2 academic institutions. He has the distinction, he didn't finish his story, but 4 American universities and counting. Maybe there'll be more. But most of us can't describe Albert Einstein inviting us to tea and saying, "I'm in solidarity with you," and trying unsuccessfully to reverse one of the firings. So if you lose after Einstein intervenes on your behalf, you've really lost after a good fight. When I listen to Lee, and we've had many coffees and dinners saying, "Tell me that story again, tell me that story again," I realize the statement, it isn't the moment that you're stuck that you need the support, but the uphill battle that follows that, the battle back to sanity and faith and security. And I've always wanted to know, and have never gotten the answer from Lee, maybe he can't answer it himself, how he managed to get back that long uphill climb to sanity and security. The primary inspiration that Lee offers is in some of the things he said when he was asked about his lifelong efforts on behalf of everything you've heard. He says, "The question isn't why some people behave decently, it's why too many others don't." And he also said, "I would have paid a higher price living with my conscience if I hadn't done it. I have no regret over what it did or what it cost us." Well, no, I know that you mean that with every fiber of your being, but I also want to get you to admit that, as someone observed, the truth will set you free, but first it will make you miserable. Well, however miserable it may have made Lee not to breathe his native air over the last 50 years, it has been Canada's gift. He's going to tell us how he moved to Alberta and York in the subsequent years, and I still can't believe my luck in meeting him. If the greatest test of courage on earth is to bear defeat without losing heart, then you, Lee, have won life's lottery. It's wholly inadequate to say that we, your friends or admirers, wish all the best for you in this wonderful award. Thank you.
That is the loveliest way to end this award ceremony. Dr. Nancy Olivieri, who I hope many of you, I think many of you already know it, Dr. Martin Muldoon, a colleague at York. And thank you both very much. And I guess I'd like us to rise and really give Lee Lorch our congratulations and say thank you. And then please join us for refreshments. Lee's